growing up, I absolutely despised having a stutter, and it caused a lot of self-consciousness, a lot of social anxiety, and to some extent, depression as well, because I felt super frustrated by the fact that I had to be different all the time.
You haven't had the opportunity to practice your technique, which is speaking to 100 people. Maybe we start there.
Sure. So the way that I work on my stutter is by using a breathing technique, which requires taking a deep breath every few words. And then step 2 is to practice that technique by asking 100 strangers for directions. And it's in psychology they would refer to it as desensitization, or even exposure therapy, which essentially consists of voluntarily putting yourself in the situation you find scary or uncomfortable again and again and again.
That's an interesting experiment. I'm thinking about myself talking to 100 strangers, and there are times where speaking to a complete stranger is worrisome. I can't imagine it's any easier. In fact, I can imagine it probably feels harder when you know you're battling a speech impediment. Was this something that you were born with? Something that you, I don't know what the right word is as you got older it developed? Like, what's the story there?
Yeah, so it is not a hobby that I took up recently. It's something I've always had. My mom tells me that at 2 years of age, or maybe 2.5, she had already noticed some disfluency in my speaking. I often joke that my mom is still waiting for me to finish saying my first word. So I've always had it, but I would say that my relationship with it has changed drastically over the years.
How does something like that happen? How does a speech or a stutter develop? Is it something that you're born with? Is it something that happens in the brain? Like I admittedly don't know very much about the process behind it.
It oftentimes is a side effect of handsomeness. So it has, I would say, it's a combination of factors. There is there are genetic and also also neuronal causes for having a stutter. It's an issue that happens in the area of the brain that handles speaking. And I believe that based on the emotions you are experiencing in the moment, those can also disrupt the already fragile speaking process even more. But it is not caused by emotions or by anxiety or by stress. Those can make it more pronounced, but they're not the cause or the origin. Because if they were, then you'd probably hear stuttering in most people.
Yeah. So, as you were speaking just now, there was a moment where you put together maybe 5 or 6 words consecutively with no issue, and then the stutter came back. What happens there? What happens where you're able to speak with less difficulty, and then the stutter kicks in, and then I noticed the breathing technique that I want to ask you about in a moment, but what happens there?
The alcohol kicked in. I'll say this. I'll say for the sake of the viewer that this is not alcohol.
It says coffee on the side.
I'm having an amazing rooibos tea latte. It's a tea from South Africa with oat milk. I don't even have coffee, so this is this is how I get that fix of wanting a warm and comforting beverage. So I would say that stuttering is indeed very variable. And I even have a joke about it in my stand-up. I say that stuttering is extremely paradoxical. Some words flow right out. Others get stuck as if I am using dial-up internet. And then when I sing, I don't stutter at all.
Really?
And maybe we can get back to that topic of singing a bit later.
Sure.
But I would say there is inherent variability with a stutter. There are some words indeed that can flow a bit better. That's one thing. 2 is if I'm using my breathing technique correctly, I'll tend to have even more control. But if I stop using it for a few seconds, I'll definitely have a harder time. Yeah.
Are there certain words with letters or sounds that make the stutter more pronounced, or it doesn't matter what the word is, it's just whatever you land on in that moment?
I would say this answer has to do more with memories and with recent speaking experiences. So if, for example, the last time I tried saying something, I got stuck on a specific word, it might influence my memory, and then next time I have to say that same word, there could be some extra stress or anxiety. So ultimately, I don't think it's as much about the sounds themselves as much as it is about memories. Now, except for if you speak Arabic, I find that in some languages the sounds can indeed be a bit more challenging. So it can make a language as a whole feel a bit more challenging if you add a stutter into the mix.
Yeah. When you're thinking, is there a stutter?
No.
Do you ever get frustrated with the fact that when you're thinking very linearly, and then when you're trying to speak at the rate that you're thinking, it's not coming out at the same speed? Like, is there a frustration that builds in those moments?
It's a good thing I meditate every morning. It definitely has taught me to be more present and in the moment. However, growing up, I absolutely despised having a stutter, and it caused a lot of self-consciousness, a lot of social anxiety, and to some extent, depression as well, because I felt super frustrated by the fact that I had to be different all the time. And if you think about it, if you stutter, the only time that you are not different is when you
Don't stutter.
or don't speak.
Or don't speak, yeah.
So my coping mechanism
Stay quiet.
was indeed to stay quiet.
How did you learn to overcome that?
It took a few steps. The first step that I took, which was very influential, was learning this breathing technique to help me control it. I went to a course in the UK, and I learned this technique. And after that, though, it wasn't until years later that I was able to start actually using this technique openly, because with a technique or without one, I was still going to sound different.
Yeah.
It's just that the technique would allow me to sound different in a way that's more controlled or a bit more fluid. But if I was unwilling to openly be who I am, openly be different, I would still find ways to hide from people or to hide from speaking. So I had to accept that, okay, you will sound different. And the exercise of talking to strangers played a role in desensitizing myself to people's reactions. Because ultimately, I was avoiding speaking to protect myself from what I considered to be negative reactions from other people.
Yeah.
If I speak and I get stuck and someone laughs or someone makes a comment or someone walks away, these are situations that have happened a lot of times, and they, I believe, caused me to retreat more and more gradually. Now, the combination of having learned that technique and then practicing by interacting with people, the third step was challenging myself to work on my fear of speaking through the most extreme form of speaking, which is public speaking.
Yeah.
And I figured that if the obstacles seemed radical to me at the time, which it did, the solution had to be equally radical. And by starting to challenge myself through public speaking, I was able to change my relationship with discomfort and with fear.
Right. So the first time you and I ever met was 2019, I'm going to say.
I think it was 1 year after.
Was it?
Yeah.
Not 2020.
But so it was in February of that year.
You're right. Yeah. It was at the Yellow Let's Talk conference. You came up to deliver a talk. And when you first started speaking and I heard the stutter, I was sitting front row. I felt a level of discomfort for you. Right, wrong, I don't know. But it was just this natural reaction that came out watching you speak. And I started to have these thoughts in my mind like I would never make fun or laugh or point or anything like that. In fact, I would want to give you even more attention to make sure you knew I was present with you. But in my mind, I'm thinking, are there people in the back that are going to be making comments or laughing? You know how people can be. By the end of your talk, I was so inspired and motivated because you were delivering a message around how, yes, you have a very obvious stutter, but we also have stutters inside, and it prevents us from speaking our truth, speaking our minds about certain things. And that moment was when I first realized you have this very unique ability to turn what a lot of people might look at as a disadvantage into something motivational and inspiring. So, if this was the first time we met and you said to me you're a public speaker, I'd have all these questions, but I experienced you speaking and it was incredible. And you do this all the time now. From what I see on your socials, you're traveling around the world speaking at conferences and speaking to corporates and all these different things. That's incredible.
First of all, thank you for the kind words. I would say this is not how I expected my life to evolve or to unfold, to say the least. In fact, I was hoping to create a life with as little speaking as humanly possible. And I failed at that. But in a way, it feels like that quote by these by the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius, which goes, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. I find that oftentimes whenever we deal with an obstacle, it's a pretext to do something about it. And that something may not have happened in the absence of that obstacle in the first place. Now, of course, we always have to make a decision. And when we face a fear or discomfort or any kind of obstacle, ultimately the two possible options are to face it or to not face it. And the outcomes and the way our lives will look will obviously differ drastically based on which one of the two we end up choosing.
What would you say to someone who's in a very similar position to where you were, who was choosing to go the route of, I'm just not going to speak, I'm going to do something that requires very little to no speaking? What would you say to them?
So if we're talking about people who stutter or who have speech impediments, then of course the main takeaway from the journey that I have embarked on is that staying in a state of avoidance and silence leads to squandering all of our potential as human beings. Unless, of course, you are engaging in intentional silence, like a meditation retreat, then that's quite different. But if we are choosing avoidance or silence as a defense mechanism, then we are squandering our potential in all areas of life. And the same can happen for people who don't have a stutter and who are holding back in their own ways, due to fear or to discomfort. And if I had to speak to either of those two cohorts, I would really tell them three main things. The first is to own what makes them unique, and remembering that it's okay to be different. And I know it sounds a bit cheesy or cliche, but it can be a very significant realization when it occurs to us that we no longer have to hide the parts of ourselves that had caused a lot of shame, or insecurities, right? And every time I have done speaking engagements, if I ever ask people in the room, hey, who here has ever felt like they were different at one point in their lives, you'll see oftentimes that the vast majority of people have their hand up. And once we can recognize that it's okay to be different, the second step is to use fear or discomfort as a compass that will guide us to where we need to go. I recall once I was attending this Q&A with the author Mark Manson. And this was at a bookstore in downtown Toronto, and there were hundreds of people at the event. He does a quick speech and then says, okay guys, now I'll be opening it up to questions. As soon as he said that, my heart starts to pound. And mind you, at the time, I had already done one or two TEDx talks. I had already performed some stand-up. So this was not the first time that I'd have to speak in front of people. And once he said those words, however, my heart started to pound. And in that moment, I recall thinking, oh, if I feel this, it means I have to ask him a question. So I put my hand up. And it's, in a sense, it's about creating this new association. In the past, fear could instantly have met no, don't do that thing.
Could paralyze you into just staying put, not doing anything.
And what has changed for me is not the presence or absence of fear. It's simply the relationship with that fear. On that day, as soon as the fear hit me, both physiologically and mentally, I was like, okay, this is a clear indication or even invitation that I have to do this thing. And the last step, in my view, is to do that thing that you fear, not once, not twice, not thrice, but again and again and again. It isn't an overnight process.
Doesn't sound like it.
No.
Sounds like years of work.
It's years of having to slay that same dragon until it becomes really clear in our minds that fear and action don't have to be mutually exclusive. Fear and action can coexist. If we enter a situation we find scary or uncomfortable, with that that mindset in mind, we know we no longer have to wait for that fear to disappear before we start to do the things that we know will take our lives to the next level.
So when you talk about fear, a lot of people associate fear with the thing that prevents them from doing what they hope to achieve. And you talk about it almost as if it's this external thing that you've learned to dance with, right? Embracing it when you need to embrace it, not letting it grab a hold of you, but also still taking lead, almost like a dance partner, right? What's one thing, or two things, or as many things, but what's something that you learned in this journey with fear that you know now, and if you can go back in time and tell a younger Joze, this is what you needed to do, what would it be?
First of all, I really like the dance analogy, especially since I'm an awful dancer, so I find that it's a cool metaphor.
Good. I'm glad. I expect to see it in your next talk.
Yeah. So, interestingly, I've been recently thinking about potential titles for a book I am currently writing, and one of the options that had come to mind was Dance with Fear. So you just reminded me of that. Yeah. So really, if I could talk to my old self, and I like using the expression old self more than I like to use younger self, because I find that whenever someone refers to things I wish they could tell their younger self, in a way it can insinuate that after a certain threshold, age-wise, that change becomes unlikely or more difficult. And I like to think of our lives as the old self and the new self, because no matter what someone's age might be, I do believe that we are all a few mindsets and a few behaviors away from creating drastic change in our lives, changes that today might seem far-fetched or unlikely, the same way that the old Joze would have considered any of the recent milestones in my life as being absurdly impossible. So if I could talk to that person, I would tell him, first of all, enjoy your hair. Enjoy your glorious hair. And I would then say, look, having done hundreds of stand-up comedy and speaking engagements in English, Arabic, French, and Spanish, all around the world, having done all of these, I can say with some degree of confidence that I have good news and bad news about fear. I know that most people like to start with the bad to end on the good. So the bad news is that fear never goes away.
No, it doesn't.
No.
It just comes in different forms.
Mm-hmm. And the good news, however, is that fear never goes away. If we know this, if we know this to be true, we prove to ourselves that postponing action is futile. Because that sense of fear or dread or discomfort that we associate with that action might always emerge in those moments. So if we know that the fear might never go away, we no longer have to wait for that Hollywood moment. And that's a moment that you see in a lot of movies where initially the protagonist is having a very difficult time. Everything goes wrong, and it keeps on getting worse. He did not get the promotion at work, or she got rejected, or whatever the first scenes are. And then at some point in the movie, the character has their big aha moment. It's a breakthrough. And something just clicks. That person then goes outside. It is raining, of course. And they go running. Of course, yeah, you need the rain.
Always.
And they run with dramatic music in the background and Katy Perry's fireworks shining in the sky. That is not how transformation happened in my own journey. It occurred through what I call millions of micro moments of bravery. And these are moments during which I repeatedly did what I least wanted to do, again and again and again.
Micro moments of bravery. That's a very interesting concept. I think if we think back enough, we can find little moments, little micro moments of bravery in our own lives. And if we strung them together enough, we can see our progression and our growth. How do you said you meditate? How do you overcome the self-doubt today.
Mm.
Because everything you said to me sounds incredible. It sounds positive. It sounds focused. It sounds cerebral. But I can almost guarantee there are days you wake up and you go,
Nah.
no. Don't email me. Don't text me. Don't call me. I'm not doing it. I'm done.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question, because I do think that when someone is a motivational speaker, there can be indeed the expectation that, okay, this person might be inherently cheerful all the time and super positive and peppy and so on. I would say one of the biggest takeaways I've had in the past 6 or so years is the importance of continuously honing my mental wellness in parallel to the trajectory of overcoming fears and doing things I find terrifying. I do think that if we only focus on exposing ourselves to these terrifying situations, it will not be a sustainable path. And it's been so key for me to come up with a list of habits that I know I need to do every single day. And whenever I'm having a bad day or a few bad days in a row, I look at my habit tracker on my phone, and lo and behold, I have not been doing those things. And then if I can simply get myself to reluctantly drag myself to do those things, everything on the list, even if it takes me the whole day, but just to make sure that I'm doing my meditation, I am doing some form of exercise, I am going for a walk, a long walk, I'm having a call with a family member or a friend, even if it's a quick check-in. I'm reading something positive. And more recently I've been doing more cold exposure. A shout out to Andrew Huberman. So I feel like if I can do all those things, I'd be setting myself up for success and for mental wellness.
Yeah.
Now, so on the days, as you were asking, on the days when I don't feel like doing things I find uncomfortable or challenging, in addition to me drugging myself to complete this list of habits, I also find that there are a few mindset shifts I need to often remind myself of. And the first one is remembering the process of desensitization. and remembering that ultimately the more we expose ourselves to that discomfort or that fear, the more manageable it becomes. Now, we will still experience it, but there is a reward in that we do eventually adapt a bit, in the sense that our brains know that we have been in this situation before. We have survived it, so this is okay. So that's one. Two is to contextualize that one moment within the fact that we are currently on a swirling piece of rock in the middle of the universe.
Yep.
And while that one moment may seem personally meaningful, in the grand scheme of things, it's quite insignificant.
That's always a good reminder. Realizing that you're just a speck of dust.
And I often do that before I'm about to go up on stage at the comedy club, because even though I've done so many sets, before I'm about to go up, I look at the audience, then on the stage. I then look again at the audience, at the stage, and I think, I'm about to go up there? I then locate the exit sign. And in those moments, I do like to tell myself, Joze, you are on this rock in the middle of the universe. And I find that adding this cosmic absurdity to the moment, it adds more of a comical dynamic to the moment. And then lastly, it will be remembering why I want to do this thing in the first place.
Yeah.
Because if we can withstand the first 5, 10, 15 seconds of that fear or discomfort, that might end up leading to potentially amazing outcomes and opportunities that would not have happened had we only focused on that short-term pain or that short-term fear or discomfort.
Yeah. I gotta ask you one more question. We talked about it a little bit earlier. You said to come back to it. The singing.
Yeah.
What's the story there? Is there no stutter when you sing?
So, have you ever heard for instance, a British singer singing a song without their accent?
I think so.
Yeah. So singing and speaking appear to occur in, I mean, they appear to involve the different areas of the brain. And whenever I sing, indeed, I don't stutter at all. And that's common among people who don't stutter. In fact, I even have a joke about it in my stand-up act. Would you like to hear the joke?
Please, yeah. Absolutely.
So it goes, whenever I mention at a show that I can sing without any stuttering, I'll have someone come up to me after the show and they're like, hey, instead of speaking, why don't you always sing? And I say, because I don't want to look deranged. I know they think I would save so much time, but have you ever seen a musical? Can you imagine asking me, hey, Joze, how was your weekend? And I say, thank you for asking, my friend. My weekend was nothing but grand.
Wow. And you have good vocals too.
Thank you.
I think the next time there's one of those shows like America's Got Talent, Canada's Got Talent, whatever those, I think you should definitely audition.
Look into it. You may have planted a seed. We'll see.
I think you should. I think you're a multi-talented, incredibly inspiring individual. And I thank you for coming on and having this conversation with me. I learned a lot. And I hope that whoever is listening to this or watching this, for those who have an internal stutter, that overcoming that fear and saying what's on your mind or speaking your truth is super important. I hope that that's what you take away from this conversation. And for those that have an external stutter, I hope you use Joze here as a shining example of how you can overcome that and use it to your advantage to overcome the fear, rather. And I just sincerely also hope that anyone that's listening or watching this who comes across a person that has a stutter, that they practice a little patience and kindness. That I was thinking as you were talking about the speaking to 100 strangers that, you know, I like to believe that there's good in humanity, but I also know that there's some jerks out there and that not everybody would be patient or kind or willing to engage. And I'm rooting for you. I hope you continue to do these stand-ups. I hope you continue to do the shows. Congrats on the book. I don't know what that process is like, but I imagine it's very, very time consuming. And yeah, I hope I see you on reality TV singing.
Well, I thankfully don't stutter when I write, so that has helped. It has helped the book writing process, although my word count would have been much lower if I could incorporate some actual stuttering in the book itself. Thank you for having me on. And one thing I'll add to conclude, when you were talking about patience, you just reminded me of a moment I had at a stand-up comedy show where I said that I stutter in six different languages, which means I'm on a mission to test people's patience internationally. But in that moment, I got stuck on the word patience, and then this woman in the room says the word patience for me, and I'm like, if there was one word that you should have let me say, it's patience.
Oh, amazing. Joze, thank you so much. And let's do this again sometime.
Yeah.
This was great.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody.